views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff and management of WWDB-TV.
So sexy it hurts, and I'm too sexy for Milan, too sexy for Milan, New York and Japan.
Welcome everybody. Hey, thanks for coming back and watching us again this week. We're here at Doing It with Styles, and today I've got a really special guest. Any of you Gotham fans, you might recognize Alex Falconi. Alex is the head of the crime family in Gotham, right?
No.
No?
No.
That's not you?
I'm the administrator of our Nevada judges.
The administrator of our Nevada judges?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, what the hell are you doing here today then?
You know what I'm doing here. It's good to be back.
Okay. Nice to have you back, Alex. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. We had you as a guest on another show, WTF America, and we talked a little bit about our Nevada judges, and we didn't really have a chance to get into it too much, as I would like, and that's why I asked you to come back. So can you tell the people what is our Nevada judges?
Well, it's kind of evolved over time. Initially, it was just a project where I began to compile statistical data on how often the judges make mistakes. And now we're sort of moving into a little bit more, I guess you could call it media. We're actively broadcasting from courtrooms. We've got a couple of not really trials, a couple of hearings that are already out there. We're going to be broadcasting a trial. We also have 3 other media requests pending, one of which was approved on the Cowabunga Bay drowning case. So it's evolved. It's more than what it used to be. Let's just put it that way.
So where do you get the information that you post on your website? I mean, is this, how do you find out? Let's back up just a step first. And you had mentioned errors.
Right.
What is considered an error according to the website?
That's a great question. I constantly get that question because some people, lay people, don't understand that judges can make mistakes. They do sometimes imagine that that's just the opinion of a person, but the errors are decisions that are overturned by an appellate court, so the Court of Appeals or the Supreme Court of Nevada.
Gotcha.
This data was always available, but it was never compiled in a way that allowed the public to review how often specific judges are overturned on appeal. So when I talk about an error, that's what I'm talking about. A judge has made a decision that the Supreme Court has overturned, and it's not just based on just how they would have ruled if they were in that judge's position. It's based on legal mistakes that were made in the case. That's a very crucial point to make to the viewers. And it's not on the whim of one appellate justice. These are panels. So in Nevada, most of the time it's a unanimous decision. So the review process is in my opinion, it's quite healthy and thorough. So.
And when this doesn't necessarily mean that the judge has made a bad decision. I mean, it's based on the information that they have at the time.
Well, that's actually another great question, because you're talking about based on the information that the judge has, which implies that it's possible that the judge may not have known something that might have triggered in a decision having been overturned on appeal, but that's not true, with rare exceptions. The Supreme Court of Nevada has a couple of legal doctrines in place that require the judge to have been made aware of a statute, rule, or a case to have their intervention. If an attorney does not cite a valid point before the judge at the trial level, they can't go on appeal and bring that up and get the decision overturned. The judge has to have been made aware, with those rare exceptions that I mentioned, and those have to do with the authority of the court. They call it subject matter jurisdiction issues. And that is, it's so fundamental that makes sense to me. A judge should know when they are acting outside of the boundaries of their courtroom. And those types of mistakes, if it's not cited, the Supreme Court will still intervene and overturn, because it goes to the fundamental power of that judge. And then they have one last thing called plain error, which is an error so obvious that they don't even have to really look into it. It just slaps them in the face.
Right.
So on plain error and on subject matter jurisdictional issues, they will overturn a decision if the judge was not made aware of the problem. In other words, the judge should know.
Right. And so all of this information is a matter of public record?
It always has been. It was
Yeah,
just
that's
never
what I mean.
compiled.
It's just, you're the first one to compile it into one place, so
Precisely.
you don't have to run all over town to find out
Exactly.
all of this information.
Right.
How long have you been doing that? When did you start?
Started in 2014,
Whoa.
probably May. Sounds about right.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So 5 years.
Right. It was more of a hobby back then. But it started to take a mind of its own.
Wait.
especially-
It was a hobby?
It was for fun, yeah.
Okay.
Because I was a computer science major.
Okay, so, and that's, you just said, I'm going to mess around with this, see what I can come up with, and
Exactly. I was
Right.
curious.
then you got hooked.
Exactly. Well, what happened was people started to contact me, and the more and more I got, communication from people, the more I realized it shouldn't just be a hobby. I kind of felt more like it was an obligation at some point, especially in 2016, and it's just taken off from there. So,
Well, I fell in love with the site because I have always thought that judges, we vote to have judges in office, and we know the least about them, I mean, as a whole, than anybody else, any of the other candidates. And most of the time, people don't even get that far down on the ballot. They don't even vote.
No.
And it's because they don't know.
Right.
Or they're driving to the polls and they say, well, I saw that guy's sign on the way here, so I'll vote for him because I recognize his name.
Right.
Or I'm going to vote for all women this year. I'm going to vote for all men. Or,
Right.
I'm going to vote for bald guys or whatever. And so I think that this is an excellent way to help educate the public because these judges affect our lives every single day and everything we do. More so than the Supreme Court or any of the other courts because they affect our day-to-day life here.
Exactly. I think overtly people don't realize that, just how important it is. But I think sometimes deep down in the subconscious of our, citizenry, people are terrified of the system. And that's why so many people try to avoid it. And I don't think there's a connection there as to why. Most people are just afraid. And there was two things that grind my gears that you mentioned earlier. One of them is people have no clue which judges, who they even are.
Right.
And so oftentimes the only time a judge is removed is when they commit a crime that's so obvious or some kind of moral, like they cheated on their spouse or something. Unless they've done something like that, people just let them continue to do what they're doing. And nobody has any idea if they're actually making decisions that are consistent with the law, which is a little ironic because the citizenry of this country can get pretty passionate about their ideas and the legislation that goes through. And for them to not realize that laws are being enacted that judges are just ignoring.
Yeah.
It's like, what's the point?
Well, and especially in today's climate, it is just on a national level, it just seems like none of this shit matters anymore.
Right.
You know,
Just stop caring.
and this is a way I believe that we can start seeing. Hey, I've looked at the site and the, I look at an error rate, and at first I didn't understand it, so I started digging through and drilling down to each one of the judges and saying, okay, well, here's why it was overturned, and I think that that's a great feature of the website,
Right.
is you can go and see each one of the cases that were overturned, who overturned them, why they were overturned.
Exactly.
And man, that's an enormous amount of work. What do you
is.
do in your spare time? Yeah.
Well, a lot of people think that I'm doing each and every one of those entries, but since I'm a software engineer, I actually automate most of the process. So I write code that retrieves all of those cases for me, and every morning I wake up and it's already in the system. I use machines to do most of the work.
So where does the information come from?
It comes from the Supreme Court of Nevada's website.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
So all of that information that's on your website can be obtained from the Nevada Supreme Court's website.
Exactly.
If you know how and where to look.
Exactly.
Okay. And you've designed a program that knows how to go there and find what they need to find. And
Yes. Every morning the program goes out and what they call scrapes their page for data.
Okay.
And then I come over, or I manually review the entries that were picked up to determine, because sometimes the software is a little off.
Right.
So sometimes it's confused. So I need to approve each case just to make sure that the right judge was assigned to it, and that it was.
So
affirmed or-
you at least have reviewed this on some level to make sure that
Yeah, it's required because the machines can only do so much.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your favorite part of doing this?
Well, my favorite part is when I get feedback from the public that appreciates it, because as long as I continue to see appreciation, I'm going to continue to do it.
Right.
And also, it's interesting to see that it seems to be actually having an impact. I've always been the type of person that would listen to hearings, and I'm starting to hear things from the judges that are indicative of their concern about being overturned on appeal.
Right.
And I haven't heard that when I was listening in 2014. In fact, it's relatively recent that I've started to hear certain judges talk about, they'll confront the attorneys and they'll say, I know that you want me to do this, but what's the point if it just gets overturned? I've never heard that kind of dialogue before.
Gotcha.
And so to me, it seems like it's
They're just going along to get it through the system and get done with it and move on to the next one.
Well,
They were.
they were, right. And it didn't matter if they made a mistake or not. If
Right.
they made a mistake, who cares? It'll get overturned, they'll fix it.
Right.
But now, because it affects their record, they're
Gotcha.
concerned. And that is the feedback that I'm getting from the judges that interact with me
And
as
that's
well.
what I was going to ask you. What kind of feedback are you getting, or if any, from the judges?
Well, from the judges that communicate to me, it's mostly positive. Some of them, criticize certain aspects as to how a case is determined to be an error. But I have, responded to them, explained to them why it is the way it is. One of the things that I'm hoping...
Wait, you're not making the decision as to whether or not that case was an error.
But there are technical details. So, for example, some of the decisions are overturned in part and affirmed in part.
Gotcha.
And the way that the website deals with these types of technical niches gets the attention of the judges, because it reflects poorly on them, and they ask why I do that. And one of the things that I was...
Yeah, I've seen an example of that.
Yeah, and one of the problems is that we can only do so much with the volunteer staff and with automation. There are ways...
So everyone that's working with you on this is a volunteer?
Right, we're an all-volunteer force.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're out now in 14 other states, and...
No shit.
And our Nevada judge has a staff of like 4 or 5 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So,
amazing.
We've been expanding and...
Hang on just a second. Hey, I told you not to call me here. I know, I left the money on the dresser just like I always do. All right, I'll tell the agency that you were great, and I'll ask for you next time. Thanks. Bye. Sorry.
It's fine.
That's what happens when you forget to turn your phone off. Yeah, that's, all your dirty laundry comes out, man. So, thank you for your patience.
Right.
So, what about attorneys? Are you getting any feedback or any input from attorneys that
Yeah.
say, hey, this is great, or this sucks, or, you better leave town, or?
I was surprised. I thought I would get more negative feedback from attorneys. I do get some criticism, but it's not as much as I would have expected. Perhaps the ones that hate the site just don't talk to me. But I do get some feedback from attorneys arguing the opposite, saying, you keep doing what you're doing, it's working. I don't want to name drop, but some of them are pretty big, and that helps too, because I know that they are part of the system, and so to hear that they also appreciate what I'm doing, that's from a side that's supposed to really not appreciate outsiders intervening or influencing in, the
But we're
legal
not
system.
outsiders.
Yeah, but to them we are.
Yeah, I know that, but we're not.
No matter how much, it's odd, because in my industry in engineering, we intersect with all these other industries, and
Right.
people welcome us because
Yeah.
we're there to improve everything. But the legal system is different. They don't seem to appreciate any kind of outside influence at all, and
Yeah, they're self-policing, right?
yes, yeah,
Just like the police force and the military. And
right,
yeah.
yeah.
So I understand that you get some of your information from the Review Journal?
Well, okay, so aside from tracking cases, we do track articles as well. So it's
Right.
not just the Review Journal. We track any and all articles that mention a judge by name.
Okay.
If it mentions a judge by name, it goes into that judge's profile. And the Review Journal does happen to be most, or not most, they have a plurality. We have more articles from them than any other publisher out there.
Right.
So we do get a lot of information from them. And I guess one of the big points of contention recently is that they're going to be, what do they call it? It's a judicial survey that they've run in the past 2 or 3 times. They're going to be starting that up again for this election cycle, and that's caused a influx of communications from attorneys, and there is one judge even who has raised some concerns about the validity of that process.
Okay.
So that, I mean, I don't know if you want to know more about that, but
Yeah, I mean, it affects the credibility of what you're doing. So if there's something that you think is affecting that credibility, I absolutely would like to talk about it, and I'm sure everybody else would like to hear it.
so the allegations made by the judge are, there's three allegations. The first is that, I don't want to say the Review Journal was sending the questionnaires out because they actually use an organization called Downey Research.
Downey?
Downey Research,
Okay.
right? I actually just published a video on it this morning. So Downey Research sends out questionnaires to any members of the bar that are active, which is going to be attorneys and also judges.
Right.
And so the first allegation was that they were sending these questionnaires to actual presiding judges who were in turn reviewing themselves and submitting their review of themselves into the survey. Or
Yeah, no,
whatever
I
you
like
wanna
it.
call
Yeah, that's
The other allegation was that judicial staff, some of them have a license to practice law, so they were also getting surveys. So for example, I believe law clerks, and they were reviewing their boss. And then the third, which is the most concerning, is that I guess you could call it cliques of attorneys. They were ganging up on particular judges either to artificially boost their scores or artificially damage their scores. Some insinuations that firm partners were instructing associate attorneys to target specific judges, again, either to artificially boost their scores or artificially reduce their scores. That was the most concerning allegation, and so I reached out to Downey Research. They responded immediately within an hour to
Really?
let me know. I actually have the documents online if people want to read them.
cool.
And they told me that they would be getting back to me, and then they actually did get back to me in less than a week with a very detailed response. And they addressed all of those concerns. They rely quite heavily on the honor system, but because of how they track these responses, it doesn't seem like they can really control a whole lot. And what I mean by that is it's a very anonymous process.
Right, and how do you know who's filling it out?
Right.
You can't control that once it goes to the respondent.
Right,
So-
it's true. And I mean, what I decided to do, because I reached out to the viewers of our Nevada Judges, viewers and site visitors, and I, let them know what seemed to be going on with the allegations, where most of them wanted the survey purged from our repository. The reaction was pretty unanimous, but I decided based on those responses not to go with the majority and to presume it valid, and if a specific judge has concerns about their specific score, then they can bring that to our attention and we can look at it on a case-by-case basis. But at this point, it looks like overall, I mean, it's hard to say we should purge all of the surveys just because of what might potentially happen. It was a tough call, but
Right.
that's
So you have something on the site that says, hey, we've received this information, that some of the information that we have on the site may or may not be accurate, or?
So what we're going to do with the site is we're going to make sure that all references to the survey specifically mention that these are the opinions of attorneys.
Gotcha.
That's what we're going to do on that
Okay.
point. The other thing that we're going to do is, and we've already done, is we posted a video to YouTube, and we also posted a video to our Facebook explaining all the details that I just discussed with you with supporting documentation as well.
Excellent. So it sounds like, and I had one judge in here that was kind of upset about their standings on your website.
Right. I believe I saw that interview. That
Yeah,
was
and I told them specifically, if you think that some of this information is wrong, you need to contact Alex.
Right.
Because from what I've seen and my experience in dealing with you is that you very much want correct, accurate information on this site.
absolutely.
Otherwise, why do it?
Absolutely.
So have you had very many judges like say, hey, man, you're full of crap here. This isn't, this isn't true, or?
They're actually a lot more polite than that, and I have had a post go up, and I've gotten a text from a judge in less than 60 seconds from it going up saying something's wrong, and I quickly fix it.
Yeah.
I am getting responses.
So you are responding if a judge can show you that some of the information that you have is incorrect.
Absolutely.
You're fixing it.
Not even just judges. I've gotten feedback from paralegals. Mr. Dave Schoen has given me some feedback on certain things that actually caused me to adjust policy. Entire policies have been adjusted. If the concern, it makes sense, if it's valid, I
Right.
will make the change. That's what I'm here for. We even published our internal operating procedures, and we even took input from the public on drafting our internal operating procedures. And so we're not just winging it. We have criteria, specific rules in place, and if something on the site's not consistent with those rules or policies, let us know, because we'll fix it, because that's not supposed to be happening. If something doesn't match up, it's wrong. We will fix it.
So are there judges that you do not have on the site?
So we don't have justices of the peace, municipal court judges, and that's it. And the reason,
Like traffic court?
the justice court and municipal court judges, and we
Okay.
want to track them. In fact, we added it to our policy.
Wait, you said justice court?
Justice court has justices of the peace.
Okay.
It's a small court. It's
Gotcha.
similar to municipal court. District court is district judges.
Right.
And then we got the appellate courts. Right.
Right, just because most of us haven't got a clue. A judge is a judge.
Right.
You know? I
Right.
mean, you've got the district, you got the justice, you got municipal, you got
Right.
justice of the peace.
Right. They've got all these different types and different
Yeah,
titles.
and you
they
got the
have-
family court judges, and do you have any family court judges on the site there?
The family court judges, they're formally called district judges as well.
Okay.
And they operate in the family division. And so
Right.
since they are in the district courts, we have all of their cases up.
Really?
Every single one is up. Not only the judges that are in office now, but every single judge from the history of Nevada is in the site, even going back to the 1878. You'll
Since
see
records
judges.
were kept.
Right.
Yeah. So every judge,
In Nevada, we're lucky that all of those records were kept.
really?
Some of the election data is missing, but the actual names of the judges are there, and they're all
Right.
in the site, right?
And that was another thing that I liked about the site too. When you go to the individual judges, you can see how many times they ran,
Right.
how many times they lost their primaries or won their primaries, how many
Right.
times they were elected and not elected, and
Right.
so one of the important questions about judges, or something that has been going around for a long time, is elected as opposed to appointed.
Right.
Do you have an opinion on that, or?
My opinion actually is that we're at a point in society where there are a lot of pushes to go to full appointment. And the reason why is because the proponents of appointing judges claim that the citizenry are too ignorant and don't know what they're doing. And so it's sad, because that is one solution. One solution is to just take your choice away. Why is nobody looking at the other solution, which is, why don't we give the public data? The public doesn't have the data, and yet you claim that they're too ignorant to know how can they know what they're doing if you're not telling them?
That's exactly right, and that's has been my whole point, is that we don't know anything about these guys,
Right.
and we don't know, how do we get the word out about our Nevada judges so that people can at least go there and, well, here's the thing though, if you have 3 people that are running for judges,
Right.
and you have 2 that have never been a judge,
Right.
and you have 1 that has, so the only one that you can find out about is the one that has been on the bench.
Right.
So the other 2, how do we find out about those other 2? How do we find out what the hell they're all about?
So I actually should have mentioned this before. Anytime a candidate runs to become a judge, my site pulls them in and tracks them. Unfortunately, I can't get error rates on those people because they're not making
Right.
decisions. But I do have their articles, if they've been convicted of crimes, their background. They also are allowed to submit statements and like where their information, like where their websites are.
Right.
I also have, if they send me publications, like scholarly publications, if they've been published in an appellate court, things like that, I can post those things as well. So every single candidate, going back to the creation of Nevada, is also tracked all the way back to 1864.
Wow,
So I have
okay.
all the judges and I have all the candidates. Unfortunately, it's still an apples and oranges comparison,
Right.
because you don't have an error rate. But just because we can't get the perfect amount of information doesn't mean that we should just not provide any at all.
Exactly.
And one of
At least provide as much as you can.
Right. And one of the things that I'm hoping is that the government responds to this by saying, let's give them more info. Look, we don't like how these judges are being tracked. Why don't we also provide their attendance, how often they're in court, how quickly their decisions are made?
Right.
These are things that they can do to bolster the information that the site has. So I'm hoping that the partial amount of information that we have invites requests from both the public and responses from the government that give us more information.
Interesting. So is there any plans to expand this website to get down to the justice court, justice of the peace
Yes,
level?
partially. Part of why we did not expand to the lower courts is because it's so difficult to get data. The Supreme Court of Nevada is a shining example to the entire, judiciary in the state. They have a website, and they publish all cases, and it's free. And you can download PDFs of their decisions and all the filings. None of the other courts do this.
So the city of Las Vegas or Clark County or none of that?
None of the other courts do this. So it's extremely difficult to pull the data on justices of the peace and on municipal judges, because their mistakes are going to be determined by the district judges because of how appeals work in Nevada. An appeal from a justice court or a municipal court goes to the district court, and their records are extremely difficult for us to get access to. Some of them we can't even get access to.
Really?
Right.
And why is that?
Some of the courts don't even have online websites at all. Other courts allow you.
So the information is there, it's just not available to the public?
It's unless you want to go in and stand in line and physically request it. And the other problem is the jurisdiction.
So you would have to do that with every single judge in every single case?
Yes, it's unfeasible.
You can't say, give me all of his cases.
But I've never tried that.
Okay.
And if I did, they would want to charge probably an exorbitant amount.
Right.
And then the other problem is I can't manually put in it's
Yeah,
too
no.
slow.
I understand that. If you
Yeah.
get 84 boxes of paper, and
It's
it takes time to go through.
It's way too slow. The other
Hell,
problem.
it takes me 4 hours to edit a show, so I know.
Right. The other problem is with how the review process happens from a lower court. It's not reviewed by panel. It's reviewed by a single judge, and I think it's in many ways that type of review might be more misleading and more damaging to a justice of the peace. I hope that someday in Nevada, appeals from the justice courts and the municipal courts go to the Court of Appeals. I really do, because I don't think that district judges should be acting as appellate judges while simultaneously acting as a district.
Right.
It's appellate. Understanding all of the appellate principles is a lot, and it's better for a dedicated panel to make those decisions.
So
than for a
can you
district judge.
define an appellate panel?
So a panel is three
Or
judges.
the appellate court? What exactly is the appellate court?
So an appellate court is a court that makes decisions on whether or not lower courts made mistakes.
Okay.
And these courts.
So they judge the judges.
Right, exactly. Traditionally, these decisions are made by panel, and what I mean is, it's not just one judge deciding; it's three. So 3 Court of Appeals judges or 3 justices of the Supreme Court. In rare situations, they'll do an en banc decision, which is the entire bench, in Latin for full bench.
Right.
So that would be like all 7 justices of the Supreme Court making a decision on one case. That's, in my opinion, healthy and as close as you can get to fair. It's not perfect, but it's better.
Yeah, but it's better than a lot of.
It's better than a single judge reviewing a decision, and especially not even an appellate judge. So if you file an appeal in the justice court because a justice of the peace messed up, your appeal goes to a single district judge. It's just not the same thing.
Right.
And so that's
Because it's his opinion or her opinion.
And the other problem is if they make a mistake, you can't get access to the Supreme Court, with the exception of what they call a petition for certiorari. And it's the review on those is very limited to constitutional issues and jurisdictional issues. So it is entirely possible that a district judge can make a huge mistake on an appeal from a justice court, and you have no recourse. And that's just the way the Nevada Constitution was designed.
Gotcha.
So it's not as though they're trying to be unfair, it's just that our Constitution has decided, or we decided when we created the state, that's how we were going to handle appeals from a lower court. And so unless that changes, it's going to be one of those areas that might be a little bit more spotty when it comes to tracking error rates.
So if I go before a district judge for some reason and he screws up my case,
Right.
and I don't know that he screwed up my case, does it still go to review?
No.
Or only if someone appeals it?
Only if someone appeals it.
So there may be some things that are slipping through the cracks
Exactly.
because nobody has caught it, or
Exactly.
it's not worth it, or there's not enough money in it for me to pursue this. So
All of those things absolutely, definitely happen. And that's one of the reasons why when judges complain to me that this isn't fair, because what about all these other decisions that I made that weren't appealed? Just because they weren't
appealed, yeah.
doesn't mean that they were correct.
Right.
It absolutely is infuriating because it
Well,
implies that
and also how many that are appealed don't get overturned.
yes, there's something called harmless error.
Right.
So the judges they get breaks.
Yeah.
If it goes up on appeal and they made a mistake, but the law wasn't cited, it gets upheld.
Right.
Even though they were wrong, and that's fair because they weren't made aware. If it goes up and they did make a mistake, but it's deemed harmless, they get a break on that too.
Right.
So they get a lot of breaks.
Yeah, well.
They get a lot of breaks. Yeah.
So anyway, we need to take all the money out of politics. So
Yeah.
don't get me started on that. I just want to touch on one other thing real quickly because it is kind of near and dear to my heart. You're also a CASA, right?
Right, but I guess I got a feedback from CASA on our previous interview, and they want to have only official spokesmen speak on their behalf in the future. It's part of their policy.
Gotcha,
So-
and I understand that.
I
So-
can mention that the organization advocates for foster children.
Right.
And
Okay.
and I am a
and
court
that's all I wanted. I wasn't going to ask you anything
Oh,
about
okay.
the, no. I just wanted people to be aware that there is an organization that advocates for children, for foster kids
Exactly.
in court. So that's out there, and look it up. And it's what is the website?
I think it's casalasvegas.org off the top of my head.
Okay. Anyway, look it up because it's an all volunteer organization.
Yes, it's
Do
required.
they accept donations?
They do, but they have a separate foundation that handles that.
Okay, gotcha.
There's a money side to it, and it's
Okay.
called the CASA Foundation.
Okay, so look it up, you guys, and throw in a few bucks. Skip a couple of lattes that don't hurt.
Or
So
even better, volunteer, because it does make a difference.
that's like I said, you don't want to get into that too much, but I'm not sure that I could do that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that I could emotionally handle some of the crap that goes on.
Right,
So
right.
anyway,
Right.
so is there anything else that you want to talk about?
Well, at
Oh,
this,
sorry, time's up. No, go ahead.
at this, I think we covered everything thoroughly. We're excited to be broadcasting from more courtrooms in the future.
Oh, thank you for reminding me because I kind of yeah, you are literally broadcasting live using Facebook Live or whatever.
Yes, we're using Facebook Live. We've already broadcasted 2 hearings, and we're going to be broadcasting a trial. And then we've got 3 more media requests pending. So if those are all granted, then we'll have 3 more that we'll be providing coverage of.
Who makes the decision on whether or not, is that the judge's
The
decision?
judge signs the media request. They can approve it or deny it, but there are Supreme Court rules that guide the judge in how they're supposed to make a decision as to whether or not they're going to approve or deny a media request. And then there is a way for us to get review if a judge denies a media request. It's not as easy as an appeal. It's not as guaranteed to get it. What do they call it? It's not as guaranteed to be reviewed. It's a writ petition. It's a petition for writ of mandamus. But there is a possibility that any media organization can get review if a judge denies their media request.
So you can, I'm not sure how I want to ask this question because I'm not sure what I'm trying to ask. The law in Nevada allows for public broadcast of what's going on in the courtroom. Are there restrictions on what you can and cannot broadcast?
Yes.
If the judge has said, yeah, you can come in here and you can cover this, are there certain restrictions that you, based on the state law or based on the judge's instructions?
Based on the Supreme Court rules, and there's also some statutes, and there's also local rules that say they don't necessarily address media coverage, but they allow people to have a courtroom emptied, and these are in domestic relations matters. So divorce actions, child custody actions. In those types of cases, a party can say, I don't want anyone in here, with the
Right.
exception of family.
Right.
So even though it's not contemplating like media, it seems to imply that you can force media to get out.
Right.
So it would be ideal to cover those cases, and it might be alarming for me to say that, but my opinion for the longest time was that those cases should be private. And I recently saw an interview of Judge Judy on the Norm Macdonald show, and she changed my mind. I'm not going to go into detail. If anyone wants to see it, they can watch her interview.
Right.
But she brings up a valid point that the incompetence, and her words are much worse than mine. They're much worse. The incompetence of the family divisions of the courts in this country it's so pervasive and it's so bad and like I said, she says much worse on the show, that she thinks cameras need to be in the courtroom just because the privacy, as valid as that concern is, the damage that presiding judges are doing to families outweighs even the privacy concerns of an individual family. It's that bad. So when I saw her say that on that interview, it changed my mind.
Right.
And so now I
And
think
it makes perfect sense.
it's unfortunate that that's what we have to do, is that we have to shame the participants into doing what they're supposed to do. But
There's been some people around that say in the family court system that there should be a jury trial. Now, I'm not sure if I'm interpreting the Constitution correctly or whatever, but basically, if you have been accused of a crime or have committed a crime, you are entitled to a jury of your peers. Now, in the family court system, it doesn't appear that anyone, I mean, being in the family court system to get a divorce or child custody, that's not a crime.
it's not.
So how can you say that it's unconstitutional that they don't allow juries?
You can't. They're wrong. There's no constitutional right under the federal
That's what I
Constitution
thought.
to a jury
But
trial.
now I understand the need for something like that, and my thought would be, why not like a 3-judge panel instead of 1 judge?
You know, these ideas aren't so bad, and the only reason I say this is because the family judge, the statutes that have to do with domestic relations, they have afforded the judges so much discretion. So it's one of those things where, because of the wide latitude that is afforded those judges, I can understand wanting more than one decision maker involved in that process.
Right.
Under the Constitution, that right doesn't exist. In some states, there are constitutional rights to a jury trial in a divorce action. For example, Texas. But that's not federal constitution.
Right.
The citizens of Texas decided we're going to go ahead
That's
and
a
do
state. That's a states' rights issue.
Right.
So.
So yes, I mean, if you're going to give a judge that much discretion to make these decisions, that I can understand that argument, and I'm on the fence as to what I think about it. I think it would be better to eliminate the discretion, the discretion as much as possible,
Right.
and to purge incompetent judges. I think that is the better approach. Cut down on the discretion, fire the judges that don't know what they're doing, and let's see if that works. And if we're still having problems, maybe we should consider involving a more of a panel approach to this process. Maybe even a panel of maybe 1 judge and 2 experts or something. Maybe it doesn't have to be a full-blown jury. These are interesting ideas, and a lot of times when it comes to discretion, opinion bleeds in. There's no way to avoid it.
I do understand allowing a judge a certain amount of discretion, whether it's family court, the district court, justice court, or whatever, because here's the law. Here's the intent of the law. Now, there can be extenuating circumstances, or there can be things like the case that comes to mind for me is the woman that killed her abuser and then spent like 13 years in jail or something like that, for murder. If I was a judge, I'd have a hard time, saying, hey, you're going to jail for life or whatever, there's got to be, so allowing the judge a certain amount of discretion, I think I kind of agree with that.
Well, interestingly, what they could do is create a statute that addresses that problem. If a person kills their abuser, and there could be criteria. They've been tortured under this person for this long. So you can solve that problem with a statute. I can see what you're saying, though, because sometimes the statute doesn't exist at the time in its terrible situation, but we also have pardons for that.
Yeah.
Because it's not, we don't have a perfect system, but there are ways to solve even that. And then, of course, there is the problem of incompetent legislatures just passing. It's a real thing. I understand.
And I don't think it's incompetence as much as it is fucking bribery.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say
fine.
that, but that's the truth. I mean, it's just,
it's tough.
My neck hurts from shaking my head so much. I mean, it's just, it's
tough.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of running out of time here, Alex. I can't thank you enough for coming in here, and you know that you're welcome here anytime. If you've got stuff that's going on that you want to help get the word out there, just give me a holler. We'll have you back.
Absolutely.
You got any final words? And I don't mean final words. I mean, do you have any, before we leave here, you got anything that you'd like to share with the viewers?
Sure. If you would like to visit the site yourself, you can go to www.ournevadajudges.com. We have a Facebook, we have a YouTube, and I always appreciate any kind of feedback. If you think something is wrong, it's probably not supposed to be that way, so just let me know and I'll take care of it, or at least get back to you.
So do you take donations?
We do take donations. We have it set up on the page.
Cool.
It's a contribute page, and
Right.
you can pay by card or you can pay by PayPal.
PayPal? What do you use the money for? You don't buy suits and shit like that, right?
The money is actually, I've spent far more than I've received.
No.
So I can't even get to that point.
Understand. You're not spending $200,000 of donations on
No.
Italian suits and
It's
stuff.
going to data entry, data mining.
Right.
I also have paid to commission music for the channel. There's, like I said,
Well, there's
the
bandwidth,
costs,
there's
a server,
internet access and servers and all that stuff.
Yeah,
so.
at this point, the costs dwarf any donations. So
Yeah,
I can't
no,
even,
believe me, I
I can't
know.
even think of where it would go to.
All right, man.
Thank you
Thanks
so
again,
much.
Alex.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we appreciate all you out there. Thank you for coming back. Please share. Like I said, take a minute, go to the website, start checking out the judges. I think it's an important issue for all of us. Elections are coming up pretty soon, and I want to point out that if there are any attorneys or judges that are listening or watching, with the elections coming up, if you are running for office, any office whatsoever, regardless of your political affiliations, we here at WWDB-TV will offer you 30 minutes free time, airtime, in front of the cameras to tell people why they should vote for you. So contact us here at the station. It's a no-brainer, and we won't make fun of you or blindside you. It's your opportunity to do something and say, hey, here's me, this is what I do, and this is why you should vote for me. And like I always say, if you're going to do it with styles. Thanks.
Nice work, John.